Before we start this video, a large thank you to Ain, Oscar, Massimo, and Michael for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an immense thank you to Halo Burner and Sora Stratos for their continued support to the channel on Patreon. You guys are legends, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello guys, let's set up our boss now. I'm going to go to my animations folder, and if you guys are a patron of mine, you can access the link in the description. And I'm going to give you some animations if you want to use the DURK model. So I'm going to start by making a new folder. And again, you don't need these animations. You can use any animations. I'm just going to use these because I'm just going to make a DURK themed boss. It's probably already going to be set up if you download them, but just go in there and make sure they're all set to humanoid and put in DURK's avatar. And depending on the animation, we're going to tick some settings. I'm going to show you anyway because it's nice to know these things. So typically, we're going to have all these set to original, and then center of mass, and we're going to tick root, transform, rotation, and position on both. Now, if you have a model with a prop bone, you can actually click mask, click create from this model, and toggle all. And I'll show you. If you go right down here, if I go to DURK, it's going to say shoulder, and then we can see a thing called prop attachment. Some people use this to actually make the weapon animate outside of using the body. This is so you don't have to turn the wrist a lot, and it doesn't create like geo-crashing on the wrist. You can instead directly rotate the weapon. Now, we're not using that, but I just thought I would show you that in case you do, because a lot of models actually have that, and we do use it in Nephilim. It is pretty useful. Okay, so now that that is underway, I'm going to duplicate the undead animator controller. I'm going to call it DURK, and we're just going to make a few small changes here. So we got dead 01 here. I'm going to replace that with DURK's death animation, which we won't be using just yet, but it will be used in the next episode. And now I'm going to set up his attacks and his locomotion and his idling, which will all be used in this episode. So we're going to drag in attack 1 and then attack 2. Attack 2 is actually attack 3 for me because of the name of the animations, but you can rename them if you want. And then I'm going to duplicate it and make an attack 03, and I'm going to place this, it's called attack sequence 02. This is just a small combo that we have here for DURK. So we're going to keep the names of the animation states very simple. I'm going to make the exit time 0.9. This again is just a preference. You can look at the animations and tweak these settings as you see fit, because this is going to greatly impact how the animations are both going to look and feel in terms of timing and speed. So I am again going to just call this, we're going to put in the other animation here where he does a shout. I'm going to call this phase change 01. This is going to be played when DURK is at half HP to indicate that phase 2 has begun. So that is all good there. And now let's go over to the base layer, go to the idle, drop in the idle animation for DURK. Make sure you have looping checked on that if you don't have that already. And then on walking here, DURK is very large, so he's going to get a lot of distance out of his walking. So we're not going to have a run or sprint, because him walking at you normally is basically like an enemy sprinting at you. He's so fast. So we're going to put DURK walk forward in here for both of these. Now, I am going to go back out to the project, going to look for dummy DURK, and we're going to drag in the animator. So when you make a boss, you really want to think, how do you want this character to feel? I want DURK to be very like stubborn and kind of just headstrong, so he's just going to walk at you endlessly. So no strafing, no stopping. He's just going to pressure you constantly. Now you can go to the Undead Combat Manager and copy and paste most of the variables here and then the functions and paste them in DURK's Combat Manager, because we're just going to rename them and reuse a lot of these. So I'll make a header here for the damage collider. So for example, left-hand damage collider is now going to become DURK's club, or you can just call it club damage collider, weapon damage collider, whatever is clear to you to indicate that this is for the club that he's holding. So set attack 01 and 02 damage can stay. Just take out the other damage collider. And where we have close damage collider, we're just going to say club damage collider dot disable damage collider instead of right hand. And for open as well, we can just rename this first actually to open club damage collider. And then we can rename this one to close club damage collider. Okay, so let's now make sure we open and close this properly by saying club damage collider dot open or enable damage collider rather. Do the same thing for disabling it. And by the way, if you're comfortable setting up a character on your own now, because we've done it with the undead, go ahead and skip this portion of the video if you'd like. And I encourage you to try it on your own because it's really great practice. And you can just come back to this whenever you're done. So for the damage collider type, we could use a melee damage collider, but that will require a little bit more adjustments because it uses some other variables here for like, your attack type and stuff. So we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it very simple, very stupid, because this AI, again, is going to be pretty basic. Let's first make another attack modifier here. Just give it a random number for now. We're going to use its own damage collider here, much like we did for the undead. So if we ever want to add its own logic in the future, we can just use that like so. I'm also going to create an attack 03 damage just in case you want to throw that in there as well. And this looks like it's enough to get us going for sure. So I am going to save all of this now, and I'm going to rename melee damage collider to DURK Club Damage Collider. That doesn't exist yet, so let's go ahead and go make that. I'm going to go to the project, right-click anywhere in a folder, and create a new C# script. Go to your scripts colliders folder if you want to be neat right away and not have to drag it in later. DURK Club Collider or Damage Collider, and we can copy the logic from the undead Damage Collider exactly, basically, and put that in there as well. Replace the AI character variable with an AI boss character variable that we can use for DURK specifically. And I think other than that, we're fine. Drop in our namespace as is per tradition. Delete the start and update functionality. Make this derive from Damage Collider so we get all the base logic. And let's see, I think we're good to go. I'm just going to check this over real quick. Yeah, so let's replace undead character with DURK. Let's replace the variable with the type AI boss character manager. Now, you could just make a base damage collider for all your AI, for all your simple AI, but I like making one for each individual AI because at least I found my game as it evolved, I did need its own individual logic a lot of the time, and I just like having because you're only going to have probably 20 to 30 types of enemies at most, usually. So just giving them their all distinct damage collider is, I just like it personally. You can use a base class though, it's probably going to save you a few scripts if you do that, because I'm sure some will have overlap where they can share it. But back to the topic at hand. Let's go now to DURK, go to the club, add a collider to it. I'm going to use a capsule collider. Make sure you tick is a trigger, and make sure the layer is a damage collider layer. And make sure you disable the collider first, so it's not enabled until we open the damage collider via the animation events. So it's the z-axis if you're using a DURK model like me, and if you're putting on a weapon, this could be a bit different depending on what you're doing, but for me, I'm just going to adjust the height and direction, but the direction is the z-axis. So I'm going to put my layer here to damage collider. That looks good. Let's add the component here now for DURK Club Damage Collider. Now you can drag in the damage collider variable, but I think it fetches on awake. Likewise, you can drag in the boss character variable, but that does also fetch on awake, so it doesn't really matter. But we do have to drag in the club collider in DURK because we don't grab that on awake. Of course you could, but I'm just going to drag it in right here like this. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to save that now. I'm going to rename it actually to DURK's Club, just so it's very evident what it is. I don't think I needed to, but I did it anyway. So now you can see we have an attack state here, a combat stance state, an idle state, and a pursue target state. Now let's rename these to undead, because in the future, we're going to actually start adding more variables to these states, and you're going to want to give different states to different characters. For example, on some characters, you're probably going to want the character to do a full-on sprint when they chase you. On others, you're going to want them to walk. So for that reason, let's give each character its own folder for its states. I have undead here. I'm going to duplicate that and make one for DURK. It's going to have a copy of all the original states. I'm going to rename these to DURK state, and the one we're going to change right off the bat is the combat stance state. We don't want DURK having the same attacks as our undead, or maybe you do, I don't know, but specifically I don't. So I'm going to erase the attacks here, and I'm just going to change the names of these again to DURK. Now right now they're identical outside of just the attacks on the combat stance state, but like I said, that will definitely change when we get into the more advanced forms of AI. And it's just nice to have everything have its own place and location anyway. So DURK gets his own states, undead get their own states, there's no sharing, no overlap. I particularly like that. I find it saves me a lot of pain in the event you want to add on or change something. So I'm going to make a new attack for DURK. I'm going to duplicate the original zombie attacks and then make a third one because the animation names are still exactly the same. And then I'm going to drag in DURK's attacks here and then add the third attack as well. And we're good to go. Okay, cool. So it's looking nice. Now let's go to the attacks. Let's take a look at what we're working with. So right now, the first step is to set our collider's damage. So the first animation in the first frame, set attack of 1 damage. Then you want to find right where you think that thing is going to open up. So right there is where the swing really starts coming in. I'm going to open the club collider there. And then right when it touches the ground, I'm going to close the club collider. Now the club isn't facing the right way in the preview. That's okay. It won't be like that in the game. We're going to adjust the position of it in the game as well. Don't worry. So likewise here on the Mace 03, what we're going to do is do the same thing. We're going to set the attack here at the first frame and then open and close the frames we want the damage collider to be open on and we're swinging on. So that was good right here. I'm going to, actually this one's a bit wider for sure because this attack is meant to be played if you're behind DURK, so you can swing around at you like this and you can kind of get a full sweep. So you want some attacks to cover all angles for bosses. If you get around the boss, you want the boss to be able to defend itself. So this is the attack for that, where DURK will do a full-on 180 sweep and spin around. And lastly, here's this combo sequence. We got a Stomp here. We're going to make a little attack for that. Let's add a function for that in here called activate DURK Stomp. And we're not going to do anything with that right this moment, but we will do that in this video. We're just going to put the animation event there for now and come back to that. Let's do everything else first that we already are familiar with. So let's place the DURK Stomp right there. And that looks good. Now let's also open and close the damage colliders and set the attack. This is still attack 1 technically. It looks exactly the same if you see the swing after he stomps. So we're going to use attack 1's damage, and we'll use the same extension here for the open and closing of the damage collider. You can see there's the overhead swing right after he stomps. Okay, that looks good. Now if we apply that, we are good to go. And that's a few of the damage animations set up. So let's go into DURK's prefab. Let's make sure we're placing in all the proper states that we just made. So DURK states, not the undead states. And that looks good. Make sure DURK is also on team 2, not team 1. Otherwise, you won't be able to lock onto him or damage him. Now, if we go into the game here now with it running, let's actually take DURK's club. And I'm just going to position it where I want. And then I'll jump back here. Here we go. So now I'm going to copy the component of the transform. And now stop the game. Now go into DURK and right-click on the club and paste the component values. And there you go. You can copy it while it's in the game and then apply it to the prefab after this way. Also, I didn't tick his trigger on the damage collider there. I'm going to do that. Now, I just took the regular hit sound effects that you guys have here, but I've just like pitch shifted them in Audacity, which is a free sound program. I'm going to use those for DURKs. And if you don't want to use any, just say if damage grunts.length is greater than 0, play a damage animation. Otherwise, you can do nothing. So this is under the character sound effect manager. This makes it so you don't need to have the sounds and it won't throw you an error. You can also edit the distance here and the angles for your attacks. So if you want the full sweeping attack to be, full sweeping, it should be minus 360 to 360. Likewise, give it a lot of distance because DURK has a lot of reach. So keep that in mind too if you're using DURK. Otherwise, if you're using your own model, then go ahead and test it out because we're going to need to test it, trust me. All right, so let's go to the sequence here now. Again, the animation, let's see what we have here. So let's allow DURK to rotate here. So enable and disable can rotate whenever you want the frame. So give him a little bit of tracking, Otherwise, he's probably not going to hit much. And again, guys, this is completely subjective to how you want the game to feel. If you give the AI a lot of tracking, they're going to feel kind of unfair or, very difficult at least. That will mean you have to dodge. If you give them the perfect amount of tracking, then if you're sprinting to the side, you should just be able to get out of the range of the attack before it launches off on you. This also will have to do with their rotation speed. That comes in a factor of all this too. But you're going to have to play around these values a lot. It's very rare you'll get them right the first or second or third or fourth time. I spend a lot of time tweaking my AI once they're fully set up in Nephilim. So don't be afraid to mess around and see what you can do. I'm just taking you through the whole process here now because this is a large part of the time in setting this stuff up. It's not just the coding, but tweaking all these values. Make sure you apply all of Kirk's layers to the character layer for now. He doesn't have hittable hitboxes yet, so we'll do that later on as well. Now go to the combat stand state, and let's just make a serializable field here for pivot, and we're going to make this a protected bool, and we're going to call this enable pivot. And basically, if we want to allow a character to not pivot, we can just check for this everywhere. So this is on the character combat stand state, sorry. What we can do is we can just check for enable pivot before we try to do a pivot. And now that I'm thinking about this, I believe we have this too on the find target, so maybe we'll place that on the character combat manager. We'll try it here for now, but I'm 99% sure we have to replace that. That's okay. So we don't want DURK to pivot right now because we have no pivot animation set up for him. So let's just, he's still doing it. So I think it's when we locate the target. But anyway, let's just see what else we can find here. Okay, so the attack works good. That's great. Wonderful. The stomp isn't set up yet, but I don't think I can dodge. Do I not have invulnerability set up? I definitely do not. Okay, cool. So let's set that up. We can roll, but we're not actually invulnerable, so I guess I didn't do that yet. I think when I made roll, we didn't have a damage system in place yet. Let's do that. All right, so let's go to the character combat manager. Let's make two functions. We're going to make one for enabling is invulnerable and disabling is invulnerable. And these are going to trigger on an animation event, specifically on your rolls. And they're going to toggle whether or not you can be damaged. So let's make a bool for this now. We're going to make it on the character network manager, just in case you want it to be a global or network variable. I do in my case for Nef for a couple of reasons. You don't need it to at this point in the series. You could just make it a local variable because damage is handled locally most of the time. But for the reason of if you don't want to play damage effects when another person hits you on their client, then you should have it as a network variable, like the blood effects, even if the damage doesn't go through. So we're just going to make a bool for is invulnerable, and we're going to defaultly set that to false, not to true. And now let's go over here and just say right here, character network manager is invulnerable is equal to true, and then is invulnerable is equal to false. Now, this should be defaultly set to false. Okay, now we're also going to check for if is owner, because remember, you can't apply this unless you are the owner, otherwise you'll get an error. You can't apply network variables, because this animation event will play on a client if they play an animation on your end of the game. So it will try to run this logic, is what I'm trying to say. Let's save that now, and let's go over into all of the places where we want to put this, which is just a roll animation for us. Let me grab that real quick. I believe it's roll forward. I'm just going to go to the humanoid controller. Yes, and it's this right here. So now you can look up the frames that you get, but I think it feels best when you become invincible immediately in the first frame. And then you can decide how many frames you want to give the character of invulnerability. I'm just going to place a random number here right now without thinking too much about it. But you will want to play around with this to decide how much leeway you want to give a character when dodging an attack. That is very, very important. So I suggest you just, kind of decide what kind of feel you want for the game. If you want to be more brutal, or if you want to give the player some more iframes when the roll carries on. Okay, so you're also going to want to go to your reset actionable in the animator, and this is just in case you get knocked out of the roll animation somehow before you toggle the animation event to end is invulnerable. This will make it so that every time you conclude any kind of action, your invulnerability will be set to false, so you can't glitch invulnerability on all the time. So right here, just if character is owner, then your invulnerability is equal to false, because we come back to this empty state after every action. All right, so if we go to the damage collider now, you can see we're supposed to check here if the target is vulnerable. So you could go to every damage collider. Well, it is a base class, so most times it's going to share the same on trigger enter. And you could check it right here, and that's fine. There's a problem with that, though, a small problem. It's that some damage colliders will have different on trigger enters. So if I go over here to the melee damage collider, you can see it's different. It's overriding it. So what you should do is just go to your take damage effect here, and you can just put it right at the top. If the character is invulnerable when this damage is being processed, then just return. Do that before you play any effects. And if you want to, again, you can put it on the damage colliders too as a failsafe. But if it's here, this is where all the damage colliders converge after they've attempted to do damage. So you can just come here right and stop it right here at the source. So if the character is vulnerable, just return. And now we can save that, and we're good to go. And I can erase that now for my damage colliders. At least I'm going to, because I know I don't need it there right now. If you want to keep it there, go for it. Now, if I go into the scene here with DURK, let's go over and look at him. And yeah, he's still got that little pivot happening here now. So let's see. That's definitely on the locating a target. And you can see he's not really able to track me with that club on that first attack. So that's something we can change. And he's also snapping back with that backspin animation. So these are all easy fixes. On the pursue target state, if I go here, I think there's a pivot here too. So I can also make an enable pivot here. The same thing I did for the state for combat stance. Now, if you want to have the state dependent, that's cool, because you can make it so some, like say, for example, if you have 4 zombies, but you give them different states, you can make it so some zombies can pivot and some can't. So that's the benefit of putting it on a state. Now, the downside is you have to put it across all the states. The benefit of putting on a combat manager is you only reference it in one place. So it really comes down to whatever you want to do. So as far as the tracking problem goes, or the spinning problem, untick the first root transformation bake here on the animation. And now when he spins around, he should no longer instantly teleport to the direction he was facing. Let's just make him do that real quick before we move on. I need to see that. And yeah, there we go. So he doesn't snap to the location he was when he started the animation, which is great. Now he'll end off wherever the animation has him rotate. So we're not able to track still with that attack. So let's add tracking for that attack now. So I'm going to just put in an enable and disable can rotate on the party where he swings the club. Let's give him a little bit of tracking wherever you think it should be, and that should be fine. I'm gonna hit apply, and I'm just gonna check here too. I think I already have on the combo one. I think I just forgot the first attack. Yes, I do. Okay, so we're fine. All right, so that should be good. Now I'm going to move over this enable can pivot to the character combat manager, and we're gonna make it happen from there. So basically, if this is enabled, then the character will be able to pivot across all states. If not, they can't. And I'm going to go down here where we have find target, and right at the last part where it says pivot towards target after you find them, I'm just going to say if enable pivot. So if you want, you can keep on the states individually. I'm going to remove it from there because, like I said, the benefit of having on states is you can have the same prefab enemy, but some can pivot and some can't. But in my case, I want all my enemies to kind of have the same locomotion logic if they are of the same type. So now instead of referencing the pivot here from the state, you reference it from the character combat manager. And like I said, neither way is right or wrong. It depends on what you want. One way is going to be a little bit more neater, but the other way is going to have more modularity in terms of their enemy behavior. But again, no right or wrong way. It just depends on what you're looking for in the moment. So I'm just going to reference it here from the character combat manager, and I'm going to make sure that DURK is set to cannot pivot. Let's see how it looks. I'm probably going to add pivot to him because I think it might look a little bit weird where he's so big and burly, but we'll see. So he's targeting me. Yeah, okay, he's not pivoting. It doesn't look too strange yet. Okay, the attack is tracking very nicely, and I'm invulnerable. He's not hitting me when I'm dodging, and it's hitting me there when I'm really close to him. So he's a bit too close to me. Let's change his stopping distance. So typically we have a stopping distance of 1, but where DURK is so massive, we can probably make that 2 or even 2.5 to 3. So go to the nav mesh agent and the stopping distance, just make that 2 or 3, whatever you feel is correct. Now let's get out of here, save that prefab before we start. Go into the game again, and I think this should be a little bit better. Yes, that is already, I can tell, quite a bit better. Alright, so let's see how he looks when he does a few swings now. And let's see if that turn looks kind of weird. That looks alright. And that looks good. Okay, see, that's the problem right there. That walk around, we could just crank his rotation speed. It wouldn't be a problem, but I don't want to do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to up his rotation speed a little bit anyway for the tracking. But we're also going to give him some turn animations. So I'm going to go ahead and set these up. Again, because we're rotating with these, and you just set up your humanoid avatar, make DURK the avatar, but because we're rotating, you want to not tick this first box where it says root transform rotation. But you want to set it to original, at least for these animations, and the other one you want to set to original as well, and the last one is center of mass. These will differ depending on your animations, guys, but for the animations that I'm supplying here, these are usually almost always the settings. If you're rotating, don't tick the first box if you want to copy the rotation of the animation. So let's go in here now, and you can see here I've just got the turn left 45 and 90, just turn left, the turn right 45 and 90, turn right. I've got all the other turns, it's just turn around. And now you can see here our rotation speed depends on the nav mesh agent rotation. So to adjust the rotation speed, at least the locomotion speed, you want to adjust angular speed here on the nav mesh agent. For attack speed, it's different. That's in your combat manager. And let's make pivot towards target a virtual void on the AI character combat manager. And let's override it on DURK. Let's copy the exact same logic, but we're just going to remove a couple entries. Because DURK only has left, right, or all the way around. So we don't need the little in-between parts. And that will be fine for him. So just basically erase the 45s and the 135s and you're good to go. And if any of you out there are into editing animations, you can even take the ones here now if you have the DURK animations and kind of make your own 45s or 135s. But I don't think you'll need it because of the way DURK is. This kind of also plays into the big lumbering kind of like buffoonish type of creature that he is. So I think this will suit him a little bit more anyway. So if I get in front of him here now and I'm just going to walk around him, and yes, that's looking good. Let's see, I want to give him a turn, so I'll bait him out for the attack. Oh yeah, there we go. That's much nicer. And he's just going to keep pivoting around. That looks really good. All right, I'm very content with that. So let's go back into the DURK Combat Manager. Let's add a float for the Stomp damage. I'm just going to say 25, just random arbitrary number for now, just to get it working. And I'm going to make a collider array here. I'm going to make it called colliders. I'm going to say it's equal to physics. This is under the activate DURK Stomp function, by the way. Physics.overlap sphere, and we're going to pass the position, which we don't have yet. So let's make a variable for a transform. We're going to call it DURK's stomping foot, or just something to indicate that this is the foot for DURK and his stomp attack. So I'll call it DURK's stomping foot. And we're going to make the position that this overlap sphere starts on at DURK's stomping foot dot position. And then the radius, well, let's make a variable for that too. We'll call it the stomping attack radius. I'm thinking something like 1.25 or 1.5 to 2.5 is probably a decent little size. So I'll make a float, stomp attack, AoE radius is equal to we'll say 1.5 for now. We can probably adjust that. Maybe 2 will be a bit more gracious. So then we'll pass that. Cool. And now we want to do some logic that's similar to our damage colliders. Now, let's make a for each loop here. And let's say for each collider inside of colliders, the array we just made, let's search for a character by saying character manager, character, equals collider get component in parent. So if we've established that we have a character, we want to do some logic. We just want to damage them, but we don't want to damage them more than once per character, and if this hits multiple damage colliders, it will damage them multiple times if we don't do something about it. So we're going to say if character dot is owner. Now, why are we doing this? Well, if you get hit on my screen but don't get hit on your screen, it's still going to send you a damage if I don't check for owner, which is going to be really annoying for you. But if we check for owner first, you have to get hit on your screen when the animation drops, not on my screen. So if there's a second of latency, it's going to take the animation on your end and not on my end for you. And it's going to take the animation on my end for me, because we're firing this on a damage or an animation event. So if the local character is the owner, we're going to take it from the animation event on their respective client. This makes it so it's not frustrating if you, on your screen, you clearly dodged, but because you have a little bit of latency to the host, you still got hit. This makes it so on your screen, if you don't get hit, you're not going to get hit. So let's go to the damage target functionality in Damage Collider. Let's just copy this whole generating a damage effect thing. And we can copy to check in the list to see if the character's been hit. Now, I'm just going to use physical damage for this. You can change it if you want, but I'm just going to equate that to DURK's stomping damage variable up here. And I'm also going to apply the same amount of poise damage as I have for stomp damage. You can give this its own variable too, and I encourage you to do so. Damage target becomes character. And we also have to check and make sure we're not damaging the same character more than once. So let's go ahead and grab that list. That is, oh, I'm on the wrong script. Let's over here on the damage collider script. Just check here if the character has already been damaged, and if not, add it to the list. And we want to erase that list every single time we're running this function. So we're going to initialize that list as a new list inside this function every time it's called. So let's go ahead and first check if the character is not null before we do any of this. Otherwise, we could get an error if it doesn't actually hit anything. And let's replace damage target with character and replace return with continue, because remember, we're in a for each loop. We don't want to break the loop if there's nothing here or if we already damaged this character, because we could be damaging other characters too. All right, so now let's actually drop in that list as a local variable right here, and now we're good to go. Now, this is a bad thing to do, and I'm going to explain why at the end of the video. Not a bad thing, but it could be done better, and I'm going to get you guys to do it in a better way. We can also check for the character layer, so we're only running it on that layer by saying world utility manager.instance.get character layers, and there we go. That's very nice. Now I'm going to get him to try to stomp on me. Let's just see if this works. I should take 25 damage, and oh, there's an error. So let's see what's going on there. Yeah, so I didn't drag in his foot. It's his left foot, by the way, if you're using DURK as well. So I'm going to save that, try it again, go through the fog, get his attention. Come on, DURK. Just need to get him to step on my foot, potentially, and hurt my toes. Okay, so that one missed, but I'm thinking it's just not a big enough radius. I'm just going to try one more time. Yeah, that one hit. Okay, so it's working as intended. Cool, excellent. That's awesome. All right, guys, so we have a bunch of attacks that we have a fully working an AI character here now. That turnaround is very nice too. He turns around properly. So what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to add sound effects to all these attacks. We're going to add a great foe felled on the next video if we kill him, and we're going to add a boss HP bar, and we're just going to polish him up and add all the bells and whistles to a boss fight. But before I go, we're going to get some information on the screen as to why I said the way we implemented the stomp attack is bad and what we can do to make it better. So let's look at that right now. All right, so we should have put that stomp attack on a damage collider class of its own. So why should the DURK damage, specifically the stomp attack, be on a collider class? Well, in the future, when we're taking damage, some attacks will be blockable, most will be, some will not. But all damage collider base classes, because everything inherits from the damage collider base class, so all classes that derive from that will contain a virtual function for check for block. This means if you want to adjust blocking logic, you only need to override it and do it in one place, okay? So basically, because all damage collider classes share the same base class, they get access to the same functionality on that base class. So if you have separate check for block functions across different, say, character combat manager scripts, if you ever decide, you know what, I'm going to change fundamentally how the block works, how you check for the block, instead of just editing it on the base class and maybe changing it on, a couple of different damage collider classes, if you've made the block slightly different for different kinds of attacks, you have to go through every combat manager or every special instance where you have this function. So for that reason, it's always best to keep functionality where it's going to share some logic in a similar class or have it inherit from a base class. Like I said, now, if we have it on a damage collider, you get access to all of the functionality on the base class of that. So that includes the check for block. Now, this isn't law by any means. Both ways are still correct, and the person playing the game won't notice at all if you place this in a different location. But to make your life easier, it's always best to stay on top of these things as much as possible and to keep them as neat as possible for as long as possible. So whenever you can, just try to, keep all your logic in one place. So yeah, if you're using the DURK model and the animations provided, go ahead and convert the DURK Stomp attack to an attack that will function with its own damage collider. That way, in the future, when we add the check for block functionality, the DURK Stomp attack will automatically get that functionality as a part of its base class. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. A special thank you to my Patrons. It's because of you lovely people I get to keep doing this, and I love doing this. So, I'll see you guys next week when we add the boss HP bar, the awake sequence, and we'll make it so DURK can actually take some damage, and we'll get a cool, great faux felled end message when we defeat DURK.